Hey everybody, what's up? Give the stream just a second to calibrate here. How are y'all doing? Welcome. It's Tuesday afternoon. It's the Adventure Prep stream. Thanks for coming, everyone. Yeah. It's been a minute. It's been a little while since last we streamed. I've had kind of a busy week. Last Thursday was Thanksgiving, and I had a celebration with some friends, kind of a Friendsgiving. And then Saturday, when I would normally do Sea of Thieves, I was doing something very secretive that I'm not allowed to discuss. Hint, hint, wink, wink. And then Sunday, I had my Theros game in the afternoon, or in the evening, so I wasn't able to stream on Sunday like I normally do. So it's been Tuesday. It's been a whole week. Hey, what's up, David? Thanks for coming. And we're back with the Adventure Prep stream. Yeah, that's cool. How has everybody else's weekend been? Talk to me. What's going on? This week, we are talking about probably the weirdest game that I'm running right now. And that is saying something, because I am running some pretty weird games. But a game that started as a birthday one-shot, then evolved into a campaign. We played through a heavily mediated, revised version of Waterdeep Dragon Heist, which then transformed into a wacky, cobbled together Planescape Ravnica nonsense campaign. That's right, everyone. It's Mansionscape, previously known as Mansion Heist, which was my my cobbled together name for it, because we started with the characters having Mordenkainen's magnificent mansion as being like a literal kind of planes traveling location. I like the idea of slotting the word mansion into whatever adventure I run, right? So it was Waterdeep Dragon Heist, so it was called Mansion Heist. Even though it doesn't make any sense, they're not stealing a mansion. The mansion is just their kind of a central focal point. I also call them the Mansioneers, is the term that I use for them. Currently, they are in a deeply customized version of Sigil, and they are just getting up to all kinds of shenanigans. So we're not really going to cover one particular topic today. The way that this group works, we kind of jokingly call the game, every time I say, hey, we're going to play Dungeons & Dragons, they're always like, oh, there's no Dungeons or Dragons. So I jokingly call the game, or they want to call the game, Lawyers and Lawsuits, because it's a lot of like factions and political maneuvering and things like that, right? So I like this idea of like what I discover when I prepare for this group is that like I don't really prepare adventures in the traditional sense, because both games have been very urban. Like once we finished Waterdeep, I sort of asked them like, okay, you have this extraplanar mansion that can go to all these different places, right? There's like this magical kind of orrery that Acking style can take you around to different locales throughout the planes. Where do you want to go? What kind of campaign do you guys want to play, essentially? And they agreed that they liked the urban intrigue, but for reasons, because they ended up with about like a 500,000 gold, they couldn't really stay in Waterdeep anymore. So they wanted to go to a city, they wanted to be able to buy magic items, they wanted to do all of that stuff, right? But they also liked the idea of exploring and traveling and things like that. So it kind of felt like, let's go somewhere extra dimensional, somewhere they can go to a lot of other places if they want to, and that ended up being Sigil. But because the games are so urban, what ends up happening is the party will like fracture into little tiny pieces and go off and do different things, right? And so what I don't really do is I don't super prep. Like there is kind of a main plot-ish, but what they mostly end up doing is getting involved in side quest material, right? So like they will each go off and do a little thing and kind of bounce off of each other with their little side plots. So that's kind of what we're going to do today. We're going to develop a couple of the different side plots, and we're going to talk about Sigil and the weird version of it that I've made. So I proposed Sigil to the players in classic ProDM fashion. I proposed Sigil to the players only knowing like the brief first paragraph of Wikipedia summary of like what Sigil is. I knew it was the city of doors, and that it was the nexus between the different planes, and that you couldn't teleport into it, and that you need portal keys to go through the various different portals all over the place, right? That's about the extent of what I knew about Sigil. And so then going and doing research, I discovered it's quite a bit more complicated, obviously, and that, it being kind of the centerpiece of the Planescape campaign setting in 2nd edition, there was a lot to digest, and I didn't really have enough time. But I did know a thing or two about Ravnica, having watched an actual play that was set in Ravnica for a while, so I felt like I had a pretty good understanding of the different guilds of Ravnica. Sigil, see, now they've gotten in my head about it. So we had a conversation last session about the age-old Sigil debate, right? They have just discovered it, the players, and now they're getting in my head about whether it's pronounced Sigil or Sigil. I say Sigil because I was always told it was distinct from the word sigil, that meant something else, but I have heard people just say that it's Sigil, and that's the name of the city. I've been calling it Sigil because I thought they were two different things. The point was that it's spelled like that. It's a homonym, not a homophone. But there are two schools of thought on this. Which one do you say? But anyway, so I lifted the factions out of Ravnica and basically pasted them into Sigil. The Lady of Pain is still kind of on the top. She sort of takes the place of the Guild Pact, essentially, right? And I don't know the most about Ravnica, but I know enough of, like, hey, these are the different factions, and I think those factions are pretty interesting and dynamic. I think the color pie in Magic is one of the best things about that as a game. And so I took that, and then as the campaign has gone on and they have done more and more unexpected things, I find myself continuing to dip into Magic like lore and continuity to fill out the corners. Because, like, I used to kind of shit on Magic lore, and I think some of it is weird. I think there might be too much of it, and they do have that Star Wars problem of having a bunch of, like, inherited weirdness. But the individual realms in kind of the later half of Magic's history, I think are mostly pretty good. Like, I think Ravnica's cool. I think, obviously, Ixalan is really cool. I want to know more about Amonkhet. Innistrad is a really nice kind of Barovia alternative if you don't want to just do Curse of Strahd again. Like, Theros is awesome. Like, I really think that they did a good job, like, making these little perfect D&D settings that could work. They got a lot of shit because, like, oh, who is this for? But really what I think is cool about the Magic settings is that they are not designed to be D&D settings. They are designed to be interesting little kind of high fantasy takes on these classic mythological conceits. So ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, Kaldheim, right, for like Old Norse mythology. The big one I think that's really cool is Strixhaven, the one that's coming out for D&D like in a couple of weeks, right? That seems really neat too. And so, like, I don't necessarily, at the time I didn't really care about Magic, but now that I do care a little bit about Magic, these settings are really good. So my point is I've been pilfering from those settings to try to fill out Sigil, right? So there's a little bit of Ravnica in there, and as a result of kind of a random confluence of events last session, or 2 sessions ago, the party ended up adopting an entire orphanage's worth of orphans, right? I did this thing when they first came to Sigil. I wanted to impress upon them the kind of like grandeur and like randomness of the city. And so I made a table of probably 20 random sites that they could see as they walked around, right? And they could be things they interact with. They could be things that they don't. You know, some of them are meant to show off like how extraplanar the city is. Some of them are meant to highlight particular guilds in the city, right? And it was just meant to be like, hey, here's the thing. You know, you can't kind of go anywhere in Sigil without seeing a random, incredible marvel. So whenever they travel from location to location within the city, I have them roll on this table. There's a little bit of a cheat to it because I ask them to roll the D100, right? But I really only have 20. And I just pick the one that's closest, or I just pick the one that I want. But it gives them this sense that, like, oh, it was random. He didn't know what it was going to be. Right, it's a little bit of deception. Don't tell them about it. Because I think they get really excited, like, oh man, it could be anything. He's got 100 things figured out. I don't. But as a result of one of those, one of the random sites that the characters saw where they were just traversing the city was they saw a group of 20 orphans shackled together like a chain gang, being led away from their foreclosed orphanage by a pair of wights, sort of like undead. Now the wights work for the Orzhov Syndicate, one of the 9 or the 10 guilds of Sigil in this case. And the joke was just that, like, they're not slaves, right? 'Cause that's what they initially thought, like, oh my god, these kids are being enslaved. Like, no, slavery is illegal in Sigil. These are debtors. That these orphans are behind on their rent, right? And so they're being taken to debtor's prison. And it was just like the most Dickensian thing I could possibly think of, right? And it was just meant to be like a highlight, like, oh man, the Orzhov Syndicate, boy, they're horrible, right? Like, look at how ruthless they are. But the players saw this and, like, they're fairly neutral evil as a party. These are like 13-year-old boys, and for the most part, they don't really care about the plights of the innocent. They're all into self-interest. Literally, one member of the party is possessed by a Lovecraftian entity and is trying to bring Cthulhu back. Like, that is the character's eventual goal, and not in an abstract way. Like, they are making active progress towards it every session. So this is an evil party with a couple of exceptions. There's maybe 2 characters in there who are either neutral or good aligned. Long story short, the players saw these orphans, and for, altruistic or not so altruistic reasons, they decided to purchase the debts of these 20 orphans, and they wanted to get them out of bondage and adopt them, right? And that has created all manner of chaos in the past couple of sessions, to the point where they've now decided, like, oh shit, we can't really take care of these 20 orphans. We have to offload them somewhere, and their current idea is to try to find a school to enroll them in. So they asked if there was a school anywhere in Sigil, and I didn't have a school ready. Of course I didn't have a school ready. Why would I have schools ready? That wasn't one of the 5 things that I prepared. So I was like, yes, there is a magical school in Sigil that kind of exists in a pocket dimension inside the city, and it is called Strixhaven. And what's funny is that several of the kids play magic. You know what I mean? Like, they should be recognizing some of the one of the kids even owns the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, but hasn't seemed to put together that I have just taken the guilds from there. Whatever, or they have and they just don't care. And so they went to try to go enroll their kids in Strixhaven, and there was some shenanigans. It's the kind of thing, that like a normal D&D player would be bored by, but this group really likes like weird bureaucratic tangles and like negotiating stuff. They're not so into combat, they're not so into exploration. They're kind of into like shenanigans and machinations and what they can do. So they're trying to offload these orphans, but the school only has so many openings, so they bribe the like admissions counselor to get their kids into the school. Like a classic Felicity Huffman situation. And then they say, okay, great, but they have to take an aptitude test, right? Because this is a school for wizards. This is a magic school. So, okay, they managed to persuade them to do it, and then next session I need to prepare these entrance exams. So the tricky thing with it, and that's the first thing we're going to tackle, Strixhaven, obviously being a real location, I have once again done this thing where I have I have slotted before my players a wizard's product that does not yet exist, right? That is not yet released to the public. So I did this with my Witchlight campaign and shot myself in the foot because I didn't understand what the framing of the initial campaign was, and so started this whole wacky thing with their parents and this Coraline nonsense that ended up being about 3 times more complicated than it needed to be. And so once again, in that tradition, I am slotting them into some Strixhaven content before Strixhaven is released. But thankfully, in this case, we do know a fair bit about it. And also, the characters themselves are not entering into Strixhaven. They are just trying to enroll some NPCs. So probably, in all likelihood, these entrance trials, these admission exams, will not be actually on screen, right? They maybe will be if the characters want to, like, sit in on them or observe them or do whatever, right? They'll probably just be something that happens to the characters to the orphans off screen. And then they might talk to the orphans about it. It's like, hey, what did you do? Was it hard? How do you feel like it went? So there are kind of 2 elements to this. They have 20 orphans. That was one of the other fun things, is that I was able to pull out the 3 orphans from Dragon Heist when they needed some random orphans. I'm like, yeah, there's a little tiefling boy with an eye patch named Squidly. And they were like, whoa, where did you get that? You know what I mean? And I'm like, I'm not going to tell them that I pulled it out of Waterdeep. They were just like, I can't believe you were ready with that stuff. So there's 2 elements to the entrance trials, I think. There is the like mechanical element of how do I determine how many of these kids pass and which ones do and blah, blah, blah. And there's also the fictional element of like what are the trials and what's going on. So as you can see here on my little document, we do know a few things about Strixhaven. We know that it kind of Hogwarts style has a number, they call them colleges rather than houses, but it has a number of colleges inside Strixhaven's campus. And those colleges, focus on different virtues as exemplified by Magic's color pie. So each college is the kind of merging of 2 different colors and sort of talking about what philosophically that means. So the way I kind of figured you would do it is it would be sort of a Sorting Hat style event where the character is, given a list of trials. A little bit of Sorting Hat, a little bit of break bills from the magicians, right? Where like they're kind of tested and pushed and they have to see if they can get their magic powers to awaken. I don't know that it will be necessarily based on like stress or trauma in the way that it is in the magicians, but it's something like that. Like I like the idea of like a kind of sterile room and then they put down an apple in front of you and they say make it float, like that kind of thing, right? But I like the idea that there's 5 tests because there's 5 different colleges, and you know, you might have aptitude in a couple of them, but it's almost like a Myers-Briggs or whatever, where the one you have the closest association with, that's the one you go to. So let's go through these different colleges and try to figure out what they might be flavor-wise. But I would also like to figure out the mechanics of, like, I think it's just like a random roll, right? Like each kid, because there's only a handful of them that have personalities. So I could just roll percentages and say X number of the kids get in, right? I could roll like 20d20 and say everyone who gets above a 10 gets in. That honestly kind of feels nice and random. Like if there are 20 orphans, you know what I mean? Like roll 20d20 and anyone roll 20d20. Or like 1d20 for each orphan. 1d20 for each orphan. A 10 or above means the orphan has magical aptitude and is accepted into Strixhaven, right? And then maybe you break it down like if there's 5 of them, then you do like Prismari is 10 through 12, right? And then Lorehold is like 13 through 15? And then, well, that won't quite work, but you understand what I'm saying. 16 through whatever. 10 and 11. And then 12 and 13, does that work? And then 14 and 15. And then, no, but that doesn't work either. What do you have to do there? 16 and 17. 18 and 19, yeah. 18 and 19. Maybe there's like a special school. Yeah, there's like a secret 6th college. I like that. That if they get the natural 20, they go to that. Like secret 6th college. I don't know what it's called, but that's the nat 20. Okay, cool. Awesome. Yeah, I think that works. So let's go through these individual houses and then determine like what the different tests would be, right? Because like we're just gonna make it random. Most of these characters don't really have personalities. You know what I'm saying? What we can do too is we can say that like the orphans are numbered for the purposes of the roll. The named orphans are like the first X number of them, right? So the named orphans are the first X number of rolls. So, you know, I think there's like 5 named orphans. So I'll just roll 20d20 and it'll show up in the Roll20 chat. And I'll just say, okay, these first 5 are blah, 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 right? So it's Nat, Squidly, Jenks, Plumero is 1. I think we did Hakari is 1. Weed. Yeah, okay. For the first 3, I obviously used the ones from Waterdeep, and then I just started pulling the names of other characters from other games, right? These like baby versions of them. Okay, so let's talk about these exams. Prismari is the red-blue college, and it is kind of the expression of like artistry and emotion and expression. So it's all about showmanship, and it's about flair and the elements and stuff like that, right? Kind of like primeval elemental forces. But it's all about emotion, and it's like the theater kids, right? Theater and music and the arts. So I like the idea of being like asked to paint something or being asked to create something that like they give you. Like clay is wrong because like I think it's more about kind of like spontaneous genius and inspiration and that kind of thing, right? Like the idea of having to magically create something feels right. Magically create something. Lorehold is red-white, and it's kind of like archaeology. It's all about exploring ancient ruins and recovering artifacts and history, but also kind of like danger and discovery, right? Like sort of the Indiana Jones school. So like my first instinct is like try to decipher a magical script, but that only really covers the like intellectual element of it. It doesn't really address the kind of like danger adventure element. So I'm not sure on Lorehold. Silver Quill is black-white, and it's about like the written word. It's like the English major, right? It's all about rhetoric and persuasion and like sarcasm and like the very well dressed, very like cultured kind of English lit types. So that feels like compose something or like analyze something. I mean, they could be a lot more like magical as well. Do you know what I'm saying? In terms of what they do, like, because I worry that they get a little too academic, but it's just like write an essay for Silverquill. You like write an essay without using a pen, and so you have to like manipulate the ink to spell it out. Something like that could be kind of cool. I'm not sure. Okay. Sorry, I got a text about D&D scheduling, everyone's favorite. Quandrix is blue-green, and it's about kind of math, but also sort of the natural world, almost like the Fibonacci kind of a college, right? It's about patterns, and it's about, fractals and things like that. So again, like the instinct here is going to be like decipher a scroll, and, write an essay. Let's write like the mundane version. Yeah, let's go like this. Like, paint something. You know what you could do? Oh, what am I doing? Paint something. Do mundane. The mundane version. Decipher a scroll. Because you could even simplify this even more, and you could just say like, write an essay. Solve an equation, right? Is this one for sure? Solve an equation. Witherbloom then is the like Witherbloom is the black-green college, and it's kind of like if I have a like I don't love this one, it's probably Witherbloom, because to me it feels very similar to Golgari, which was the black-green faction in Ravnica. It's kind of about it's the life and death thing. It's herbology, right? It's about plants and about living, growing things and decay and fertilizer and stuff like that, which again feels kind of Golgari to me. Like, I think there is like an appreciable difference between like, say, like Lorehold, which is archaeology and the ruins of the past and kind of danger, and Boros, who's all about like military might and valor. Those two things are similar, but they are distinct. Witherbloom and Golgari to me feel pretty similar, right? Like even like Prismari, which is all about artistic expression and like creative genius, versus Izzet, which is all about, has some creative genius in there, but it's mostly about like invention and artifice and that kind of thing, right? Like, and taking dangerous scientific risks. Those feel distinct to me. Like, I think Silverquill and Orzhov are night and day. Quandrix gets a little simic for me at times if it's like the natural patterns of nature, but it's less about experimentation and more about like discovery of these mathematical theorems and stuff. Witherbloom and Golgari feel very similar, and this is also the one that I think is the hardest to come up with like a mundane equivalent, right? Like, the mundane version wouldn't be magic; it would simply just be create something. Like care for a plant, like pot a plant. But that you wouldn't do that in an exam. So what you could do, right, is you could do like a they put them in the center of this room, and there are like the 5 different items. There's like a jar of paint, and there's a scroll, and there's like an ink pot, and there's, boy, I don't know what the Quandrix one would be, and then there's like a potted plant for Witherbloom, and it's like, which one of these objects are they like most drawn to? Oh, they have creatures, don't they? Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe it's about making one of the creatures magically, right? Like, yeah, because each one of the houses has sort of like almost like a homunculus kind of a creature, where like they have like a totem creature, but none of them are like animals, right? Like, let me look it up. Strixhaven colleges. Oof, I'm starving. I did not eat anything today. Yeah, they each have these like weird specific. So some of them I remember. I don't remember. Prismari, I think, is an elemental. Creature. Elemental. Lorehold, I think, is a spirit. Silverquill, I think, is an inkling. Quandrix, I believe, is a fractal. Oh, I do know them all. Yeah, fractal. And I think Witherbloom is a sapperling, which is a magic creature that's kind of like a little sapperling. Just like a little plant dude, little mandrake. So it could be that like they're given the individual materials, right? Like, and then they're told to make something out of it. So they're told to make the creature, right? Like, if they can manipulate it and turn it into the thing. Acquiring sustenance is an important part of the day. That's true, 2 Army Kid. You're not wrong. Also, thanks for coming. So maybe it's that, like, they're put in this room, right? And they are given a scroll. And if they can read the scroll and conjure a spirit from the scroll, then they have what it takes, right? If they are given, like, a flame, maybe for Prismari. Oh, boy, look at David coming in with the words here. Quandrix could be like a chemical reaction because it would depend on, I do not know that word. Stoichiometry? Boy, coming in, which is math. Yeah, it could be. Because I'm trying to figure out, like, Prismari is an elemental. Because my immediate idea is, like, paint, right, for Prismari. But they're all about fire and, like, lightning and kind of the elements, you know? Like, the raw forces of nature rather than, like, Witherbloom, which is kind of about, like, living forces of nature. So, like, my instinct is to give them, like, a flame for Prismari. You know, or lightning, maybe, because it's a nice combination kind of both fire and like water, like red and blue a little bit. But like if they give them something electrical, that's just gonna hurt them, right? Like Inkling is easy, that's like an ink pot. And then Quandrix, yeah, chemical reaction. Could be chemical because it's got that natural life thing going, right? Because it's got the green in there. Witherbloom feels like a plant, right? It's like a pot, yeah. So I think what they do is they give them the raw material. And like they don't have to actually make it, they just have to like show a promise. So let's do like, do you keep the flame alive? Yeah, that's not bad. I kind of like that. Or shape it into something, right? Like can you manipulate the fire? Turn it into an elemental. And like if you do that, then yeah, you're in, you know. If you can manipulate it, then you might have promise. Because I like that like several of the kids that show aptitude might show aptitude in multiple areas, right? Bonus points if it's in a storm. Yeah, I think it's in like a little room, right? It's in this like little like blank kind of cell. Elemental, spirit, inkling. Yeah, so this is a flame. This is a scroll. This is an ink pot. It's Quandrix that I can't quite figure out. It's a fractal. So what they're essentially doing is like solving a math equation, right? So like abacus or like kind of like David suggests, like a chemistry set. But chemistry feels, I guess chemistry is kind of like Quandrix. It feels more Witherbloom to me or Prismari, right? My instinct is that it's like, because fractals look like weird like shards of glass or whatever, right? They're these kind of like the monsters, like not the actual mathematical conceit. You know what I mean? Like they're these kind of crystalline things. So yeah, maybe it's crystals or something, but crystals don't feel alive in the way they need to be for green, you know? Fibonacci shit. I think it's crystals. Yeah, I think that's simplest. And then it's about kind of getting them to interact with each other, right? And understanding the angles and stuff involved. Okay. So the trial, if a, oh here, let's write it in here. The child is given an open flame, and if they can manipulate the flame, they have promise in Prismari. The child is given an ancient scroll. scroll, and if they can summon forth a spirit from the text, they have promise in Lorehold. The child is given an ink pot and quill, and is given paper and ink, and if they're, I like this, if their writing summons an inkling, they have promise and silver quill. What if instead of fire, because that feels kind of dangerous, the child is given paint and canvas, and if their art summons an elemental, they have promise in Prismari. So it's like, you know, it's magically treated paint or whatever, right? But if they paint something and there's kind of like, they just express what they feel, because enough emotion gets put into it, it can create an elemental from that. I think that's cool. The child is given an abacus. Because we talked about crystals, but now I wonder if it is literally just like, do this thing. Can you kind of read this scroll and get a sense of what it's about and summon forth the spirit? You know, is given a math equation. Yeah, it's given a mathematical proof. And if they solve it, it creates a fractal, and it shows they have promise. Finally, my material science class paid off, yeah. J-centered cubic or hexagonal, yeah, that's cool. Creates a fractal. They have promise in Quandrix. And mathematical proof. Okay, so the child is given a potted plant. Yeah, the prompt could be create some art. I think that's cool. It's given a potted plant, and if they can make it grow, it grows into a sapperling, and they have promise in Witherbloom. And then lastly, if the child shows aptitude, oh boy, oh, there you go, in all 5 colleges, obviously still from some Marvel, they are declared a nexus and are whisked away to a special secret school. Maybe hint at planeswalking. We'll see. But I like that idea that like maybe one of the kids disappears, right? Like, oh, they were too good and they had to be taken to this secret better school. Okay, cool. I like that. I think that's really all we need, right? It's just like, this is kind of like, if they end up observing, which I think you should do behind one of those like one-way glasses. Maybe it's like a scrying pool that they watch the trials in. Like if they, I think they are meant to be confidential, but the party can probably talk their way into watching them if they want to watch the trials. But really it's just to make sure I know what happens and how it's done, and then determine how many of the kids end up getting into the school, right? Okay, cool. I think that's that. Nice work, everybody. That's one of the 4 tasks that we have today. It only took about half an hour, so that's good. Nextly, we're going to talk about the elemental plane of fire. I need to come up with a portal somewhere in Sigil that will take us to the elemental plane of fire. Let me talk to you about why I need that. So one of my players is a fire genasi, and one of my players is a fire genasi, and while they were born in the material plane, part of their backstory is that they accidentally, like, they're from like this volcano community, and they accidentally awoke a primordial beneath that volcano. They are legal guardians. Yes, that's. Is it back? Are we good? It's probably going to be a delay for just a second while this recalibrates. My setup's a little janky, so sometimes if I move it, Let me know if the delay is still bad, because I can always start the stream and stop the stream and start it again to let it catch up. But hopefully it's better. Let me know. One of the characters is a fire genasi, and they accidentally released his primordial, and it destroyed their sort of home city, and now they are trying to do research and learn more about it. And part of that research will essentially take them to the elemental plane of fire to try to find a way to pull the primordial back into the elemental plane. But anyway, the point is that we're in Sigil. Ooh, a hearth used in a specific famous forge. Ooh, I like that, David. Ooh, a hearth is cool, like a blacksmith shop. Ooh, yeah, that's good, actually. Because... Oh, perfect. Great. Awesome. Thanks, David. Because I have a plot line where the character currently believes that their family was destroyed in the explosion, but several of them escaped, thanks, Jormy Kid, and are actually living here in Sigil, and they just haven't crossed paths yet. So I like the idea of somebody... Yeah, that's so good, David. Yeah, because I had come up with this character. There's like a fire genasi blacksmith in the neighborhood that they're currently living in Sigil that no one has been to yet, that is actually the character's like uncle or something, right? Like someone in their kind of, you know, not immediate, but like one step removed family, right? And so, but no one had gone looking for any weapons. No one's gone searching for magic weapons yet. So I haven't been able to use it, but I could then say, okay, people know that this particular, that like many of the people who, many of his family, the people who lived in the city, fled to the elemental plane of fire first, and then from there went to Sigil. And so this blacksmith shop might be one of the ways in which they did that. That's so good. Okay, so the blacksmith shop, nice idea, David, is called Seven Smokes Smithy. I love the idea of it being in a hearth. A hearth in a particular forge in the smithy, perhaps once used by a famous smith to make a famous item, imbued with power. That smith is either dead or now imbued in the item that was originally made there. The ownership of the smithy has since jumped around, but is now in the possession of... the character's name is Will-O-Wisp, so we call him Willow. Willow's uncle. Yeah, that's great. Okay. So what's the port key? The way I understand these portals is that they, you need some kind of an item to be carrying it or whatever to basically bring you through the portal. So if you pass through the portal without it, you're not transported. But if you have the item on you, then when you pass through the portal, it whisks you there. So it's usually some kind of mundane item that you need to carry on your person. If it goes to the elemental plane of fire, it feels too easy to be something that would be in the shop, right? Like, but it does make sense that the characters would still have it, or that like the person, I think Lulo is their name, is the Uncle Lulo, now in the possession of Uncle Lulo. I think Lulo is his name. I could be wrong, but for the purposes of this stream, Lulo is his name. So basically what I'm saying is that, like, there is a complication narratively in that by going to this smithy, ooh, a lantern is cool. That by going to this smithy, it's like, oh, hey, it's my uncle. But it doesn't actually make it venture. I mean, it might if the point is to say, like, the rest of your family is alive and they're here in Sigil. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think that's the complication. So it's like the rest of Willow's family survived the catastrophe and is now dwelling in Sigil, though across the city from the mansion. By visiting Lulo, Willow learns of this learns of this and wants to go visit them. So then I think the port key can be something simple that Lulo has, right? Like if Lulo is the one who traverses between, you know, Lulo has taken possession of the smithy and runs it, even though it's across the city, because this is their portal to and from the elemental plane of fire. So yeah, then I think I like the idea of it being a lantern or something they have to carry into the hearth. You know, so like a light you wouldn't need in the elemental plane of fire, which is constantly, you know, lit all the time. A lantern, maybe a lantern that burns with a blue flame. Burns with a blue flame. Yeah, okay, cool. Where do you suppose it deposits you on the other side? My instinct is the city of brass, just because that's simplest, you know, that they would come through that way. Yeah, maybe it's like a hearth in the city of brass destination. A hearth in a fire giant's forge in the city of brass. I like that. On the elemental plane of fire. Cool, that was easy. Look at, we're flying through these, y'all. We are flying through. Okay, cool. Awesome. That's 2. That only took like 10 minutes. Good job, guys. All right, next up, we have a Rakdos performance. So if you are not familiar with Ravnica, Rakdos, the cult of Rakdos, is one of the 10 factions. And they are sort of like a bloody-handed circus. They're kind of like the insane clown posse of Rakdos. It's red-black, and the idea is that it's the combination of fatalism and kind of like free expression. So it's all about sort of like masochistic pleasure and, you know, like crazy dangerous stunts for the sake of it. It's sort of like the Joker house, right? Like it's the one that's all about taking needless risks and the thrill of the crowd and like things like that. So they operate as kind of like a roving pain circus essentially in Ravnica, where they go around and they have performances and they're seen as being very subversive, but you know, even the high and mighty end up going to their shows because it's the best, you know, it's the greatest show on earth kind of a thing. So I have, of course, ported them over here to Sigil, and they are basically the same. Narratively speaking, the Rakdos are tied in with one of the characters' backstories. Our rogue, Rolf, was born and raised in a circus, and as a result, at some point in his youth, the person who ran the circus made a deal with a devil to try to like bind a devil to put it in the menagerie of the circus, and it went, or a demon, and it went horribly wrong, and then the demon ended up like enslaving and capturing the souls of all of the performers, and only he escaped, right? And then he's been wandering around doing rogue stuff or whatever, but he, you know, has always wondered what happened to them, and like wondered if are they imprisoned in hell somewhere. Well, it turns out they're here in Sigil, and that demon was Rakdos, that the former ringleader Phenomenon tried to kind of like ensorcel, so, or tried to imprison. So the idea is that when he comes to Sigil, because of the bargain that the former ringleader made, technically the rogue sort of belongs to Rakdos, right? Like he is like held in this bond. Hey, what's up, Hunter Fox? No worries. He's held in this bond to this demon Rakdos, and he has to like try to contend with that. Also, the people who raised him are still held in bondage by Rakdos as well, you know, through this infernal kind of contract. And it's about, you know, springing them, getting revenge on Rakdos is his goal. The demon that destroyed his circus. He's not been super active in this plot, and he frankly, he's not going to be there next time, but I would like to figure out what this means. So the things we know are that like there's a performance coming up soon. I have dangled the fact that it's the same one in front of him. He knows that Rakdos runs this circus, and they are seen in the city as being kind of a nuisance, but everybody goes to the show. Nobody doesn't go to the Rakdos performance, even if it's to you know, kind of sneer at it. So what I need to do is I need to figure out like what are these acts, like what does the show do, and I would love for it to have some kind of a like splash effect, if you will, right? Like I like the notion of the big performance, the big top or whatever, being this thing that draws in everybody, right? It's trick-or-treating. It's like it affects the whole neighborhood. Everybody goes, or everybody is affected by, in some way, this event. It's kind of like the Witchlight Carnival in that way, I guess, but I want it to be a little bit more openly maybe risky. So I think I had originally made a list of some of the acts. The other trick that we have, unfortunately, with this party is that they are all like 12 and 13 years old. So there's not tons that I can do in terms of like what I think Rakdos is like meant to be, because the content is such, right? Like I can't do tons of like masochistic weirdness because, you know, that's not gonna fly. You know, it's a little bit too weird. So let me look up what I had written down, because I think I went through a bunch of the cards that are kind of Rakdos cards. And I was trying to figure out like, okay, how do I make this work? But I like the idea that they like set up, you know, the tent in some like large, in some large central area, right? And they are in the big spotlights and like everything you would come to expect from a like kind of big top performance. But the question is just, you know, what else do we add to that? How do we make that magical? How do we make it enticing? Like, what are the things? So here, I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted because I'm pulling up this other list of acts. It's just tricky because it has to both feel kind of circusy and performative, but it also has to have this kind of like dangerous undercurrent, right? So like one of them I think was like a knife throwing contest, right? Where it's like somebody is like tied to the wheel and then it's spun and then the knife thrower is blindfolded, you know? And maybe it's like an audience volunteer, so it's not a professional throwing these knives. Things like that, right? Where it's like, ooh, you're there because you want to see somebody get hurt. That's kind of the conceit. Hunter Fox asks, do you run for tons of different groups of 13-year-olds? Or are they all the same group of kids? There is some cross-pollination, but it's largely different groups. It's kind of started as one group of about 6. Actually, no, it was more like 10. Yeah, it was 10 in the initial group, but they were 2 parties, so like 2 parties of 5. And then, like, you know, then it was like siblings of that group who were like, hey, we want to play too. And then friends of friends. And so it's kind of like evolved into about 6 groups of kids that I run for. Well, I mean, it might be more than 6 at this point, but there is some cross-pollination. So there are some kids that play in multiple games, you know. Locked in with a lion and you must tame it. Yeah, that's cool. Like a lion. But I feel like it has to be like an owl bear or something, right? It's got to be slightly more dangerous. It's not this one. Where on earth is my Rakdos thing? I like that though. Locked in a cage with a beast. Oh, why is that italicized? Locked in a cage with a monster. And given like a time limit to tame it. You know, maybe there's a gate that separates the 2 of them, and in, you know, 30 seconds, the gate is open enough for the monster to get through. Can you tame the beast in time? Like that kind of thing, right? Like where there's this kind of reality TV element to it. The circus. Oh yeah, here we go. So I have a tightrope walker on a spiked chain. Was an idea I had. A knife throwing competition where the target is spinning and the thrower is blindfolded. Oh yeah, I had a demonic pinata that dangles from a chain and is beaten by blindfolded audience members who then like taunt them as they do it. Fire breathers who, like, when they do it, they kind of crisp and burn away. Something with a hypnotist. I like acrobats that are lit afire and scream in agony as they perform. You know, little things like that, right? Like, yeah, so we've got a trapped tightrope. There you go, right? A spiked chain. So what I want to do, I want to figure out like what the main event is. I'm trying to think if there's like an Evel Knievel style like stunt is sort of what I'm thinking about, right? You know those cages where the motorcycles like whip around each other. Aren't there motorcycles in Avernus? Right? There's like the demon grinders and stuff. I could have sworn there were like motorbikes in that. Maybe it's a cage event with those, but then it's just like motorcycles, right? Like, what's the extra kind of juice to that? Ooh, Rakdos could show up. Yeah, it feels like it should be Rakdos. Yeah. Hey, also, what's up, Shadowner? Thanks for coming. Yeah, let's make it Rakdos. I'm gonna look up what I know about what we know about Rakdos. That way, I can kind of figure out what it is. Because if he's the big bad, it feels like he has to make an appearance, right? Rakdos. Oh, come on. What do you think the hypnotist does? I like the idea of a hypnotist. I think it was one of the cards, but I don't know like what that would be beyond just. Oh, sorry, there's probably some lag as I load this. Apologies. Oh, this is a stat block. I don't want a stat block. Oh, here we go. Embodies hedonism, is the consummate entertainer whose mere appearance is an act of grisly performance art. A monstrous figure standing 30 feet tall. It's just a Balrog, right? Demands the spotlight. His every entrance is a showstopper. Yeah, exactly, Shadowner. What are the entrances like? Is that a thing? To adore him. Thousands of spectators. Maybe it's like an emperor thing, right? Maybe it's like more of a Roman Colosseum, where the point is that like it's not about him running the show, it's about him being like entertained. You know. Let me see what they have here in Guildmaster's Guide. Oh yeah, okay, it just says the same thing. See what they say about him. But like, ooh, it forces the players to fight each other. That's cool. Yeah, that's not bad. That it's like a wrestling match, but two people are hypnotized. Because they might not be the volunteers, right? Hypnotists. Hypnotist who forces people to fight one another. But it's always like, yeah, I think it's like the hypnotist. Oh boy, like, is it like a kiss cam thing where like it's always couples? Forces couples to fight each other? Right? It's like almost like a Jerry Springer thing where the point is to like see them like, you know, tell him a secret that you don't know. Like yeah, that's cool. If it's this like daytime TV, like, you know, you have a secret child kind of scandal thing. Because the point, right, is that like it's just shock and horrify and like, you know, delight. It's just like guilty pleasure is the whole conceit of Rakdos. I like that. Yeah. So it's this very like, and they could do it to like best friends or whatever, right? That like, you know, people who have a connection, the point is to kind of test it and like get drama out, right? Again, very reality TV. I love their tagline. The first line of the description of the Cult of Rakdos on the page is "Tomorrow is an illusion. Everything is ridiculous," which I love that. Great. I mean, I think I like that idea, Hunter. Hunter says, I mean, I guess that would make it entertaining to Rakdos. I think Rakdos is not the ringleader. I think Rakdos is the audience. Other people come to it, but Rakdos is the one who gets to decide whether or not, you know, this is a good performance or not. So a lot of the horror comes from the like thumb, right? Like Rakdos deciding whether it's funny or not. Like, I think that's kind of cool. Let's see what they say, but that's kind of where I'm leaning. That rather than Rakdos participating in the performance, Rakdos is the only person in the audience that really matters, you know? Oh, great. Let's see. The Rakdos believe that unrestrained moment hedonism is the only sane way to live. They wouldn't describe them as sane. Yeah, again, insane clown posse kind of stuff. Goals of the Rakdos, center a demon lord who exemplifies the concepts of chaos and evil. Elements of flame and death, indeed. There's not a lot about Rakdos himself here. Yeah, I'm leaning towards thumbs, right? Like that he's the... Ooh, there's a cool picture of it as well. Yeah, that's sick. Okay. So what I would love to figure out is like a... Oh, that's a good picture for Phenomenon. Sorry, I'm getting distracted looking at these pictures. I would love to figure out like a splash effect. So I think that like everybody goes to the thing, right? And it's like a big event, you know, to see what happens. And all the scandal of this and that and this, right? Like it's this big event that is well attended. But I also like the idea that it has some, like, I'm thinking like purge rules or something, right? That like the night of the performance, there's kind of like a sports riot or there's some sort of a thing. Like whenever there's a Rakdos show, you know, it causes this wild rumpus, you know. Oh, there's more Rakdos flavor in the MTG wiki. Cool, I will check that out. Let me do that right now. But that like the kind of forces that be in my version of Sigil are trying to crack down on the Rakdos. The Rakdos are one of the big threats. They consider the obviously the Gruul clans to be another big threat as well. But I like the idea that the reason they're worried about it is because it creates this like attitude, this kind of like madness in the population. You know, like I think something like that is cool. That there's maybe like a purge style, like sensory effect, or you know, it kind of causes everyone to go mad for a night when it happens. You know, the night of a performance, there's a madness that strikes the surrounding neighborhood. This causes in Star Wars for the huts. There's something like this in Star Wars, says Hunter Fox. For huts called the Grani Nupa. I'm not familiar with the Grani Nupa. Hey, I thought I knew everything there was to know about huts in Star Wars, but I didn't know about the Grani Nupa. I'll have to look that up too. This causes a purge-esque effect, an uptick in crime, and looting. Really? Is that for West End or for Edge of the Empire? Because that's awesome. That lasts until sort of like dawn, because there's no day or night on Sigil. This physical description. Rakdos is ancient, powerful, and evil demon who personifies the chaotic fury of red mana and the death and defilement of black. Consummate entertainer whose mere appearance is an act of wisdom. They say like his mere appearance is performance art. Like, what does that mean? Fire demands the spotlight. His every entrance is a showstopper. Okay. FFG, yeah. I love that system. That's one of my favorites. Edge of the Empire. Yeah. Jaded as he is, Crouch has witnessed the performances of those who adore him. To them, his opinion is the only one that matters, but he is a demanding spectator. He has seen thousands of years of circus tricks and has no patience for performers who don't give their all. His flaming sword has brought more than one tepid show to a sudden and spectacular close. So there's some of that is kind of in there, right? Jaded as he is, Rakdos attends his cult's performances only rarely. He often retreats in his lair below Rix Mahdi for months or years at a time, but his followers know that he might emerge at any time to witness the latest spectacle. Getting him to show approval of a performance or even actual interest is regarded as the ultimate test of a cult of Rakdos. Yeah. There you go. I think that's it. That's exactly what we need. So I like the idea that like if we're wrapping this up into Sigil, that the conceit is that like is the only real audience member. The performance is actually a portal itself, allowing Rakdos to enter into Sigil. Perhaps he was banned by the Azorius or something. Like, because I like the conceit that, like, the Lady of Pain exists, right, in this setting, but she, for some reason, yeah, right, is fool with us with Penn and Teller, yeah. She exists, and she, for some reason, permits him, right, but I like the notion that the performance has to be done to free him in some way, right, that, like, he is in the lower planes, and that the performance... Like, he could just show up, right? It could just be that, like, he owns their souls. That he owns the souls of everyone who performs in the circus. And he has, ever since Phenomenon, the ringleader, tried to summon him, to imprison him in her circus. So maybe this is just like a... Yeah, it's not that his whole thing isn't this circus. He's just the... It's like when a rich guy buys the Knicks or whatever, right? Like, this is just one of his pastimes. Yeah, that's cool. Okay. So the performance is actually the portal itself, allowing Rakdos to enter into Sigil. Like, he's not banned or anything. He's simply too busy elsewhere causing havoc and destruction. The circus is... his, like, soap, right? So, like, you know, he watches his shows, if you know what I mean. Yeah, I think that's cool, because then he's just like a bored guy on a couch getting to be like, yeah, I like that. I think that's cool. And again, like, he has so much more lore in actual Magic, but what we're kind of trying to do here is, like, cobble together something that works for the purposes of my campaign. Okay, I dig that. That's what's huge about it, is that, like, it's one thing to have a bunch of lore and say, like, okay, this is who this person is. Like, for example, I had Laurel Silverhand was a major character in my Waterdeep Dragon Heist campaign, as I think she is in Waterdeep Dragon Heist itself, but I moved her around. She became the Black Viper rather than having Esvel Rosnar be or whoever Rosnar be the Black Viper. I combine it. I don't care about Mistra or whatever. I don't care about that stuff. I was just like, okay, we're going to take Silverhand, and we're going to say that she's the Black Viper, and that she's both running the city and fighting crime. And she was a crime fighter rather than a robber, right? Like, that kind of stuff. It's all about taking the pieces and retooling them and putting them together in ways that make sense for my brain. That way I can improvise with them. If it's a bunch of, like, this is the lore that I don't care about, then, you know, I can't improvise that way. I do like Shadowrunner's idea, though, that, like, a lot of it is about mocking other people in Sigil, right? Like, acts that mock or ridicule other members of, like, the guild, Sigil's guilds. So there's a plot line right now in this game where, okay, long story short, they came to Sigil by teleporting into it, which you're not allowed to do, right? They own Mordenkainen's mansion, which teleports around, and they used it to teleport into Sigil, which is against the Lady of Pain's rules, and so these, like, spectral chains wrapped around the manor, and now the manor can't teleport anymore until they pay off their debt, which is this huge, exorbitant, like, 614, billion gold debt that they owe to the Orzhov Syndicate, who basically works as the Lady of Pain's, like, sort of debt collectors and bureaucracy. And obviously they're super corrupt. But then, so the idea is that they're working for Orzhov to, like, pay off this crazy debt. You know, if you do this, we'll take off 10 million from your debt. If you do this, we'll take off 50, 100. And then eventually, they whittle it down if they do a certain number of missions for Orzhov. And so their first mission is to try to sabotage the political campaign of someone who is running for the Azorius Senate. They specifically said they liked the idea of manipulating politics, and so I gave them, okay, here's somebody who's running, and I needed the notion was to, like, sabotage their campaign and shoot them down because, the Orzhov Syndicate doesn't want this person, for whatever reason, to become this important senator. So they need to be someone that, like, an undead bureaucracy would hate, and so I needed, like, a Celestial or something, right? And I was like, oh, what would be funny would be to do Lulu from Avernus, right? Take the kind of, like, little fluffy Holophant, silly Care Bear character and say, okay, she's running, and it's like, I choose you, Lulu, and, like, Lulu for you, or, like, the signs and the posters that get hung up. This is presumed to be like post Avernus. You know, we're in that weird gap period where she's like lost her memories or whatever. And like Zariel still exists, and she's presumably just in hell and doing whatever that they haven't. That story hasn't happened yet in this campaign. And so they're trying to sabotage Lulu. And so I like the idea of there being like an ad or something, or an act that mocks or ridicules Lulu during this performance. So maybe they think like, oh, we might be able to make an ally of the cult of Rakdos, even though they're sort of crazy. If they don't like Lulu either, this gives us another potential ally. That was a long story, but I like the idea of putting that in the performance as well. That's cool. Okay. So there's some kind of a splash effect, sort of like a purge thing that has this uptick in crime. The two things I want to figure out about that, like specifically Lulu. I think that there is a like the wisdom saving throw or whatever, right? Wisdom DC X. The characters are perhaps affected by this and are filled with a desire to cause mischief and raise havoc. Not sure how I would do that. I don't think the kids will need much like prodding to do that, right? Because they like to create chaos. So I think if it's like you are filled with this desire to do it, then I think that's fine. I can just say like, this is what's true about you now. You want to do this, and then move on. And then the other one I think is that like there is a Boros response. So the Boros definitely would know that this is happening. Ooh, if the Rakdos performance kidnaps a leader from Orzhov, and the players can knock off a great portion of the dead. Ooh, I like that. That's cool. Yeah. Do they capture someone from Orzhov? Ooh, that's really good, Shadowrunner says. But Rakdos himself shows up, and without a satisfying show, he might take it on the players by spoiling the show. That's great. But they capture someone from Orzhov. Ooh, like a disappearing act. And then the party gets assigned to rescue them, but that ruins Rakdos's fun and earns his ire The Boros response, that's really good, Shadow. I love that. They dispatch a troop of soldiers to patrol the streets, anticipating the chaos and rioting. Lulu uses this event as further proof of necessary reforms within Sigil. Great, love it. Into it. Okay, that's plenty for the Rakdos performance. I love that. So we've got a little bit, we got about 50 minutes left. We probably will go for another half an hour or so. What I would love to do is I am running out of wacky sites for my sites in Sigil table. So I would love to make some more just random things and like little plot nuggets that the characters can encounter as they kind of walk through the city. I have a list that maybe I will copy over and put here so that way we can see the ones that I have already done. Let me see if I can find it. Scrolling through. Yep, here it is. Okay. So here's what I have so far. We'll just run through these really quick, and then we can try to come up with some more. This is going to be the fun part, I think, is the sites. So thanks everybody for kind of bopping around randomly. Let me grab all of these and just move them over one. Sorry, doing some very sexy formatting here. Everyone loves to watch formatting. Okay. So we have Lulu making a stump speech to a crowd of enthusiastic supporters. We've done that one. I had a platoon of Boros Legion soldiers escorting a wheeled cage with Gruul prisoners inside. Done that one. I have not done the beneath the canopy carried by thralls who blister and hiss in the unpleasant light. A vampire takes the air. I've not done that. I've not done a Golgari corpse collector. I've not done goblins vandalize a nearby building, writing a phrase, not Gruul, then die on the wall. I have done a collection of weeping children who are all thrown into shackles. That one kind of led us on this crazy tangent. That's why we are where we are now. I have done a pair of tieflings who advertised for the Cult of Rakdos. I had an elephant-headed priestess, removes a paving stone and plants a seed. Yep. I've done a Lizrog, head of a frog, body of a tyrannosaur, walks through the streets, studied by a pair of scientists. I've done, this one I really like. There's like a dragon beggar. Copper dragon, wrapped in bandages and looking sickly, begs for passerby for spare coppers. I like that one a lot. And a freet merchant who sells bottles of liquid fire. I've done that one. Yes, I've done these. These are old Planescape things. The floating heads, expressionless and made entirely of silver, called mimirs, which tickled my Viking heart. Accompany the citizens around, defining things for them. So they're kind of like little tour guides you can buy. The mimirs were really fun because one of the players hired one for like a session or two. And it was a lot of like, are you hungry? I know 4 noodle shops within walking distance. Like, it was absolutely just a Siri, right? But it's Mimir. Great. A random passerby suddenly stops, gripping their chest. Then a slod tadpole bursts from their chest and slithers away. I did do this one. Yep. This one was lots of fun, too. A barrel on a nearby rack pops open. And one by one, a dozen dwarves and a halfling emerge and dust themselves off. I added a wizard in there as well. And I just did an Ian McKellen impression. And it was very funny to watch them be like, wait, this is the Hobbit. Like, that was excellent. I've done thick strands of razor vine, coat the pathway ahead, seeming to grow even as the characters watch. We had a whole encounter where the characters encountered strange floating lights and to lead the characters down dark alleys, blinking and whirling about their heads, like a will-o-wisp encounter. I did a kindly old woman, a night hag, who pushes a cart down the street selling good dreams and pleasant memories and nightmares. I did the Lady of Pain, so they've seen her at least once. And I've not done this one yet, where they just like randomly, accidentally walk through a portal and get whisked somewhere. And it turns out they have a portal key on them that they didn't know that they had. David says, a museum where you can see a 1 to whatever scale of sigil and see a bunch of little people living a little life. That's kind of cool, yeah. A mechanical gnome floating around alleyways, an oversized magical teacup. That's marvelous. Okay, so let's just write some new ones. I love the idea of like a history of sigil museum. A history of sigil museum that depicts a tiny miniaturized version of the city with tiny miniaturized people walking around. I like the notion too of it being like an Azorius thing, because you could look into it. It's like, oh hey, there's the museum. Look, and then you see yourself, and then you're looking at yourself, right? And that like it's actually based on like surveillance data. That like, wait a minute. How do you know where everyone is at all times? That's great. A mechanical gnome floating around alleys in an oversized magical teacup. I dig that. Let's see. I'm gonna start thinking about the different guilds. You guys keep throwing ideas out there. Anything they could see like on the street. Like buildings are cool, but anything that we can like encounter as we walk around is kind of ideal. So I'm gonna go through the different guilds and try to think of one for each of one of those. Let's do thinking about surveillance makes me think like an Azorius Thopter. Thopter follows the characters, scanning their faces, and then flying away. Right? Like, oh dear, what is that about? Let me pull up the list here. Boros. Oh, that's hilarious. David says, just throw a straight up Starbucks in there. Yep, a Starbucks. Like, the characters see a long line, right? The characters see a long line that winds around the block. When they turn the corner, it's a new coffee shop. Starbucks. That's so funny. With, but like staffed by monsters, right? Staffed by monsters and extra dimensional creatures. Like, yeah, that's so funny. Yep. And that's exactly the kind of joke this group would appreciate. You know what I mean? Like the Hobbit thing. Like they like that. It has a very lighthearted kind of tone. Like there's a whole plot line about like entrance exams to get into magical university and trying to like scam their way in. So, you know, that's totally in line with the humor. That's great. I love that, David. Every once in a while, I think like a good fourth wall break is kind of necessary. You know, don't take your campaign too seriously. All right, I'm gonna pull up the rest of them. So Boros, to me, it's like a Boros checkpoint or something like that, right? Like they get stomped and they have to like show their papers or whatever, you know? Yeah, like a Boros checkpoint. A Boros checkpoint. Oh, it's gonna be mermaids. Yeah, staffed by mermaids. That's exactly right. Nice job, Hunter Fox. Staffed by mermaids. What's fun is that the kids, the party, all those players are in Seattle. They're like a Seattle group, so they're really going to appreciate the Starbucks reference. The original conceit of the plane of concordant opposition was that everyone views reality differently, but strong wills exert some stability to that sector of the plane, led to the creation of Sigil. That's good to know for my history of Sigil museum, because I don't know the history of Sigil, and that's the kind of thing I would just have to like make it up as I go along. So, Ravnica. So again, it's a weird, you know, amalgam of both. I don't need a history of Ravnica. I just need the book. Give me the book. Sorry if there's a delay while I dig around in here. Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. Here we go. Okay. It's weird that it's not like a person's name. You know what I mean? The book. I feel like you could do, you know, Jace's Guide to Ravnica, or like, it's weird that they didn't make that a magic character. Okay, so the Boros Legion. So House Dimir is interesting, because the way I'm doing Dimir, we had a character who had an evil aboleth in their backstory. An evil aboleth. Had an aboleth in their backstory. An aboleth that, like, they're part of a monster hunting organization, and they were tasked with tracking down this aboleth, and they never found it, and that's kind of like the case that got away, right? And so they're trying to find them again, but they don't know where they went. And so I presented it to the party as though there were 9 factions of in Ravnica, actually, but of course there's a secret faction, which is House Dimir. So in my version of it, Dimir is not a vampire, though there are vampires working for Dimir. Dimir is an aboleth, and they're kind of like a nexus of thought in the city, right? That they have agents everywhere, intellect devourers and mind flayers and people working for them, and they collect as many thoughts as they can get their hands on. The information broker, like a lot of the stuff Dimir does, but they're an aboleth now. So that's probably why they're oh, someone just knocked on my door. I will be right back. Sorry guys. I think someone is here. 2 minutes. Thank you. So sorry. I was saying I like the doppelganger idea. That's a great idea. I do this thing where like I mute my microphone. Thank you for catching me. I mute my microphone like with the button because it's easier than doing it in OBS. And then but the button's kind of sticky. So sometimes I think I've unmuted it and I have not. Thank you for catching that. Hopefully you can hear me now. I love the doppelganger idea. That's great. I'm trying to think of who it would be. So at the end of the Waterdeep campaign, they did end up killing Jarlaxle. Well, they sort of did. Really, they conscripted. It was the most amazing speech. You guys missed it. They conscripted Xanathar to help them. So really, the Xanathar killed Jarlaxle, but you know they engineered it. But they are convinced that Jarlaxle is not dead. I think Jarlaxle is dead. He did right before he died wink at them, which implies that he survived, but I don't know how he did that. So, like, maybe it's Jarlaxle is the only thing I could think of, but that would be pretty bold, you know what I mean, for them for him to show up wearing their, you know, disguised as them. But I like that idea. Ooh, it could be Velgos. Yeah, so there's a drow that they met. Yeah, actually Velgos living and hiding. Yeah, that's great. Living and hiding. Making a profit off one of their identities. Cool. A Boros checkpoint. The characters must show papers or identification to pass. Yeah, Xanathar killed him to pass through. I think he's dead. I really don't think Jarlaxle is still alive. Like, they are convinced of it, and so I kind of like dangle it like he might still be out there, but like, how would he have survived that? That seems beyond Jarlaxle's powers to like, I think he was disintegrated. You know, I don't think he's around anymore. The magical mishap was good. A magical mishap where all the weapons at a smithy have sprung to life. Great. That's cool. So for Dimir, I feel like it's something with like an aberration. We have the Slod tadpole that escaped. Yeah, how does that work? So a Slod tadpole, once it gets away, it turns into another kind of Slod. I know David knows a thing or two about Slod. So they've seen one. They saw like a person die and have a chest burster leap out of them. And they just kind of like, let the thing get away. There was a discussion of like, that seems bad. Should we stop that thing? When they just never did. There is at least one Slod loose in the city. So like the idea of them constantly seeing new versions of that, I think is kind of cool. So once the Slod tadpole gets away, Green Slod undergo. They make a green Slod. Okay. That's innate spellcasting ability. Can change its shape to appear as a humanoid. If it was born of a humanoid host. Oh, nope. Red first. Okay. You can inject an egg from a gland under one of its claws. The egg works its way to the host and gestates, eventually forming a Slod tadpole. Transforms. Seeks other fresh meat it can find. The tadpole transforms into a fully grown blue Slod. Or green Slod if the host had the ability to cast Third Light did not, within 2d12 hours. Okay. Ooh, Disintegrated Jarlaxle could be a Revenant. That's cool. It's our red Slod. Then the blue, then the gray. Then it eats the corpse of another Slod and becomes a death Slod. Okay. So I like the idea that like you watch this Slod go through the like the life cycle. You know what I mean? So can they go from different like phases? Like, can a red Slod become a gray Slod? Or can it become a blue Slod? Is that a thing? Red Slod spawn blue and green Slod. Blue Slod spawning red and green. Each green Slod undergoes a lifelong cycle of transformation into the more powerful gray and death Slod. So can a red Slod become one of the other ones? Oh yeah, it says it right here. Duh. Transforms into a fully grown blue or green within 2d12 hours. So it could go to blue if it wasn't magical, which I don't think it was. And then blue becomes. I could also have meant the new Slod. That's true. But I like the idea of following the order. Blue. then transforms into a gray? How do you become a gray? Can you become a gray? You don't think so? Okay. I think it makes more sense to have it climb. So, like, I like the idea of it being there's like a red slot out there eating people, right? So, what would you see as a result? Like, what's the scene of that? If they saw a tadpole, yeah, I think that's like if it gets really bad, right? So, is it multiples now? Like, is the joke that it's like okay that there's this like slowly growing slod infection, or is it that there's one slod who is just getting more and more powerful, right? Maybe they see like another corpse that's been burst open, you know? I'm just trying to think like what is the natural progression? If there's one slot free in Sigil, then where does it go from there? You know, do they have to be on the street? And I don't want it to be the kind of thing that like it would immediately be like, look, a slot eating a person. You could do that, I guess. But I feel like that's the kind of thing that the Boros would stop or whatever, right? Like just like a murder on the street. In that way. Like I like it all being downstream of the fact that they didn't intervene initially. Like if they had just killed that one tadpole, none of this would have happened. So it would be a red, and like the red slot would be trying to kill and eat people, so that way it can get stronger. Right? Maybe they hear the sound of it eating someone, like down an alley, but then it's just like you just hear a gross, wet, crunchy noise in an alley. It wouldn't be clear that it was a slod that did it. I think they find another body with a hole in the chest. They find another body with a gory hole in the middle of their chest. These are 13-year-olds. Maybe that's too much. Right, and a slime trail. And a slime trail leading away. So it's less about let's follow this one individual slod and more about like, hey, this is a problem. We're getting a lot of slods now. Okay, cool. We have a Golgari one. We kind of have an Is It one. I'm trying to think like something with the Is It, like some kind of crazy invention or something like that. I think I'm winding down, guys. I think I'm losing steam. That whole slod talk. Oh, they see someone transform? Yeah, that's not a bad idea. They see... I forgot they can look like people. A humanoid transform back into a red slod, potentially. Boy, I'm running out of steam. And then green. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we are precluding the idea that they could eventually encounter other types of slod, but it's like one step at a time, right? Yeah, y'all, I think I might be done. I never ate, and that hunger is here. So I have a bunch more. That's like 5 or 6 more, which is more than I need for a couple sessions. We can always come back to this. So throw them in now if you have any last ideas, and I'll add them to the list. But I'm going to go through my spiel. Thanks for coming, everybody. We did such a great job today. We talked about the Strixhaven entrance trials for the 5 different colleges, as well as the Secret 6th College. We talked very briefly, and I think very efficiently, about the portal to the elemental plane of fire in the Seven Smokes Smithy. We spent a good long time talking about Rakdos and how the circus works, and I really love some of the plots we came up with involving, mocking Lulu, and particularly like mocking the Orzhov and getting involved in that, and like Rakdos being a kind of like a Roman emperor spectator. I liked the idea of the kind of purge-like splash effect, and then we made a bunch more randomized sites in Sigil the characters can interact with. I love the Starbucks one. I love the mechanical gnome. I love the doppelganger. Magical mishap is like so nice and clean. And then a lot of like, paranoid slod talk there at the end. But if you liked this content and you want to see more, please consider subscribing to our channel. You can click the subscribe button directly below, as well as, I believe, the bell to get notified when we post new content. If you are already subscribed, make sure that you like the video. That goes a long way towards kind of improving our very low standing in the algorithm right now. If you like my content, you can also find a bunch of other videos on the channel, as well as my Twitter. I am at ProDM. I'm at ProDM Timothy is what it is. Blah, 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 I can't think. I need to eat food. I'm at ProDM Timothy on Twitter. And I'm also on Discord, and we've got a Patreon. We've got all kinds of streams throughout the rest of the week that you can find right here on YouTube, though. So on Thursday, we'll be doing a Monster Workshop stream. I believe we're kind of doing a blast from the past, and we're going to go back to the A's, and we're going to do the Azure, which we never did a stream about. I mean, I never redesigned. I'm excited about that one because the podcast episode that we did really kind of went deep into the idea of, like, why is an Azure just a dwarf? Like, couldn't an Azure theoretically be anything, right? Like, couldn't they be, if they're constructs that are filled with, sort of like divine fire, then couldn't they be, or elemental fire, couldn't they be shaped like anything? So I'm kind of excited to, like, tuck into that and figure out, like, what kinds of crazy Azures are we going to make? That's going to be on Thursday. And then Saturday, I'll have a Sea of Thieves stream up. I don't think it'll be in time for the new update. There's a new Sea of Thieves update. I'm really excited to check that out. I think by Saturday, because I think it's like coming out the 5th, which I think is a Sunday, so it'll have to be the week after. But that's okay. And then Sunday, I finally should have a world building stream, because it's been forever, and I've been putting it off. So lots of streams throughout the rest of the week. Stay subscribed to the channel. Keep an eye out. We'll be back next on Thursday, same time, 2 p.m. PST. Thank you to everyone who came out. Thanks to Shadowner and David and Hunter, and even to Army Kid who poked their head in there for just a second. It's always lovely to know that there are people who are actually watching these silly things, even if it's just a small group of us. It's nice to know that people care and are invested in the very goofy campaigns that I run. I was surprised that Adventure Prep gets as much attention as it does, because I was worried that was like the least accessible one. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's when you can find us. We will be there on Thursday. But thanks for coming, everybody. And until then, I will talk to you on Thursday. Thanks, folks. Adios. Happy adventuring.